friends. Welcome back to the Field and Garden Podcast. It's your friend Lisa, and I'm just really thrilled that you've, taken a little break maybe, or driving down the road and have chosen to take a listen to what I have to talk about today, because it's deep today, y'all. I will tell you. I am going to share with you something that almost derailed me being able to write Cool Flowers. And I'm hoping that maybe my experience, or what do I want to say, after I'm through it now and looking back, realizing that it wasn't the end of the world, which sometimes that's what we feel like when we're faced with tough situations. And certainly it was not a loss of a loved one or a life and death, but it was pretty significant to me. And so it was brought to my attention, something that's really exciting that's been happening here at the Gardener's Workshop is we have added to our team in the last 2 years as our business has grown, and we have a lot of veins running from the original flower farm, right? And this really brings so much excitement to our everyday business. And one such thing is that Anne, who is our communication coordinator, she receives all of our emails. She's has a professional background in writing and journalism and marketing. She does our proofing. She helps with our newsletter. She has a lot of fingers in a lot of places and helps us in so many ways. And one of the things that she does is to search our content, to actually choose what she wants to highlight in our weekly farm news, right? Well, today I received from her an email that said, I just came across this blog that you wrote years ago, and it aligns with cool flowers, going into the season, hard times. She said it really spoke to me, and I just think it would be a great podcast chat. So what I've decided to do is I want to read you this blog so you'll kind of understand the facts, and then I'll come back to where we are today and just how things have evolved on this front. So I wrote this blog, or the date on the blog is May 25th of 2014. And I will copy and paste this into the show notes for anybody that wants to read it. I titled the blog, This Side of the Fence. And so I'm just going to read it to you. I walked the farm this morning. My sunrise Sunday morning strolls with Babs tagging along has been my time in the garden when I know no work will commence. It's just looking and listening, stopping to smell the roses, you might say. I have missed this ritual for the past months. As time passes and I get older and I suppose wiser, I'm learning it's not that time heals all things. It just makes it easier to swallow what you've been dealt and to see beyond. This past winter, I stopped doing my early Sunday morning walks on the farm because I took a blow. It wasn't that I didn't know it was coming. It was the reality that it is going to happen, and there is nothing I can do but watch and listen. The picturesque 39-acre horseboarding farm next to me in the midst of the city of Newport News is going to be developed. I will be, in fact, the last standing farm and farmer in the city. It just about consumed me. I had a total I had to totally block it from my mind this winter as I wrote my new book, Cool Flowers. I literally held up indoors with the blinds closed on that side of the house to keep me from looking and wondering. Not that anything has happened yet other than the surveyors walking around doing their jobs. The afternoon I saw them, I stood at the window for an hour watching and gripping a chair like I was experiencing what I would imagine is like an amputation. That's when I closed all the blinds on the west side of my house, and they stayed closed until Cool Flowers was done. I had to focus on writing and writing only. I didn't even think about what was happening and what it meant to me, my way of life, and my little urban farm. So with Cool Flowers done, I'm returning to my Sunday morning strolls. After allowing myself these months to digest or mourn the unknown future of all next to me, it dawned on me. The treasure is on this side of the fence. I have been so overwhelmed in what I will lose on the other side, I lost sight of what I have on this side of the fence. So today is the first day of the rest of my farming life. While I do not know when and how it is going to happen next door, time will tell. On this side of the fence, we're going to work to create a native buffer for the creatures to flee to and for a visual block for my roaming eye. In fact, it is becoming kind of exciting to think of all the possibilities that this is forcing me to face. I have spoken of planting a windbreak for years, but haven't because we didn't want to block the view. Now I have my chance. The garden will fare much better because of it. So this explains my absence from blogging, newsletters, and all the other things I love sharing with you. I just couldn't face sharing this until now because I couldn't bear the questions and sorrows that will ripple through the community. The end. You know, I read this, oh my gosh, and it is still really fresh for me, but not nearly as bad as it was back then. And I was so terrified, y'all, that I was not going to be able to focus to write the book. But I did. I literally, I closed those blinds. I rearranged my living room, great room, kind of kitchen area so that I could sit where I couldn't even see a window, even with the blinds down. And it worked. But that was the beginning of my journey of realizing of the gold that we have on our side of the fence. Things that are beyond your control, things that you just don't have any say in. You just kind of have to either let those things go or accept them and move on, because you can't grab onto something new when you've got your fists full of something else, right? It's kind of like life is a river, right? And it's flowing constantly. And you just have to close your eyes and hold on. And when you come around later, as I did, you're in a new place. And that's the joy of time moving on, right? So I'll just bring you up to date of all that happened. So right after Cool Flowers was done, so Cool Flowers launched in September of 2014. So I actually wrote that little blog in the spring of that year. So the manuscript had been turned in. Suzanne and I had already done all the images had been turned in, and the cover, and all the craziness that comes with book, all the stressful stuff. And that's when I went to work and seeked out a native plant landscape designer. And because I had just recently read Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, I totally understood that the destruction that was going to happen next door was going to be utterly devastating to creatures and wildlife and insects, and just really the whole foundation of the system that sustained my farm. So I went from Steve and I definitely mourned the loss of our view. We walked out our back door and saw 40 acres of basically horse pasture, horses grazing, hedgerows, trees. It was pretty picturesque. But after reading Doug Tallamy's book, I got a new mission. I was assigned myself a new mission, and that was that the displaced creatures from over there were really it was far worse than just us losing our view. It's kind of like when you don't know what you don't know, the naivety of that is really a great place to be sometimes. So then my focus became that I was going to hire, so I did. It's Denise Green. Back then, her business name was Sassafras Farms. She was actually, in addition to being a designer, she was a grower of native plants that provided them to local native plant selling businesses as well as she sold them. And so she came and we went over and walked the farm and the hedgerows, the paddocks, the pastures were broken up into 5 to 8 acre areas. There's one woodland that was right kind of in the middle of it. And she and I walked over there for her to see what type of vegetation was there, what trees, what stuff was growing so that we could try to duplicate that over here. And it was a really silent, solemn walk. I can hardly talk about it. It was really bad. So Denise then created a plan for our farm, or a border. And basically, what she did, the reason I really wanted someone that was familiar with natives, she knew, based on what she saw over there, what type of creatures called that home base. There were sassafras trees, which we still have not been successful in establishing one in our border. And there was a particular butterfly, which I don't remember the name right now, that's their host plant. So those are the kind of things. It's like, oh, this is here, so we really ought to remember to include this plant so that those creatures have somewhere to go. And, even deeper than that, all of the beneficial insects, and what, y'all, we could really just talk about this for such a long time. What I didn't understand in the whole world of the environment is, let's just say, this is not a correct number, let's just say there's 100,000 different types of insects in the world. Let's just say that. I'm not sure if it's in Doug's book or another reference book that I read. Like, less than 1% of them are devastatingly harmful or destructive or, really causing a lot of harm. All the rest of them may cause a little bit of damage, But guess what? They also have other jobs. They're either somebody else's food source or they do some practice that benefits something else in the food chain. And I then realized that I could control by what I planted on my farm. I could make a big impact on the organic practice that I was trying to live and wanted to live. Meaning, there were certain plants that I know, and you may have some too, that are buggy, that every year, oh my gosh, XYZ pest is always on XYZ plant. That's your buggy plant. Those are the plants that I eliminated from my lineup. Because guess what? There are so many other great plants that to grow that don't have that problem. And I still grow some stuff. It's like I grow milkweed. I don't grow as a cut. It grows in my border. And of course it has aphids. They all have aphids. No, I don't do anything about it because those aphids become dinner for other beneficial insects that eat soft-bodied bugs. So sometimes it fits to keep those plants growing in your environment that are particularly buggy, as I call them. But other ones I learned to eliminate. For instance, for me, being in the South, I know that Shasta daisies and gladiolas tended to harbor thrips. Thrips are a really bad bug pest for flower growers and actually vegetable growers too. Thrips are the ones that spread tomato virus around freely. So vegetable growers dislike thrips as much as flower farmers do. But what I learned is they are particularly drawn to them and they get into those plants and doesn't matter how you treat, you just never can really eradicate them. You might be able to control them, but I wasn't willing to go through all the steps to try to control them. I just wanted them gone. And I grew other things in place of those. So I knew that beefing up our farm with these native plants the first thing I realized really was that my ability to do what I do on this farm, to practice farming without using any pesticides, organic or otherwise, all of that support system lived next door in that farm, y'all. It really totally freaked me out to think that I was going to lose that. On top of, there's so many layers of devastation that happened when that farm was developed. So that really, but it gave me a purpose and a focus. And so Denise first made a design that went the length of that side of my farm. I think it's like 450 feet or something. My whole property is only 2 3/4 acres, right? And it's kind of a funny shape. So that plan that she made me was actually basically a 50-foot plan, and that plan repeated several times down the border. Repetition of the same plants and massing those plants allows the creatures to seek out and find what they need easier than putting one here, one there, one over there, one down there. So the plants were grouped, except for big trees, perhaps. And then the next step that really helped us, that brought us to where we are today, is I invested in the largest plants that I could afford. That meant and under Denise's recommendation, she doesn't recommend planting trees larger than 15 gallons just because the containers are much too large to actually handle for people like us, unless you're a landscaper with a tree spade tool that goes on a tractor or something. So I purchased the largest plants that I could get. And, life is short, y'all. If you buy a 2-foot tree and you're 60, you may never live long enough to see it actually block your view. I bought 15-gallon trees that were 10, 12 feet tall, and it's only been 4 years. You wouldn't believe the impact that this border has saved our lives, and the lives of many, many creatures, and given birds and everybody else a place to come to. So we planted that. We mulched deeply with leaves in the beginning until these plants just really grow up to shade out the vegetation. This is not a manicured landscape, y'all. This is not something you're keeping weeded. This is an area that is a naturalized area. We do have a fence around the outside. Our entire property is fenced with wire to keep our dog in, and the border goes right up to it. And so the next year, we had Denise do another side. The next year, we did another side. And so each year, we are beefing it up, because here's the other thing you have to really realize is that a landscape gets edited. What I learned from our local water works department, which manages a huge forestry area. And when I read an article about how they are constantly planting trees and cutting down trees. And what I learned from that article, which I really wished I had kept, I don't think I know where it is. He was really talking about that many of the way that the way that they grow and maintain for the watershed, is that every 15 years, they just really do, how did he say it? They harvest a lot of trees, but that's what keeps the forest healthy. They're not clean cutting anything. They are hand selecting and cutting and planting new. And I think if we as homeowners would realize that your landscape, when you plant it, it's not for life. It needs to be pruned yearly, typically. And if you stay on top of that, it's never a huge job. But also, trees are not necessarily forever. I'm a tree lover, y'all, but we often plant them too close to buildings and too close together. And sometimes removing one liberates other trees in your landscape to grow more healthily and freely and to look more beautiful. And that's kind of what we're doing now. We planted thickly in some areas, and we've cut a couple of things out, especially those things that are fast growing. But I will say to you that the population of wildlife, native bees, and native everything, have really brought the birds in. And, we are particularly bird lovers. When I grew up, my mom and dad always had a bird ID book at the breakfast table, which had a window with some bird feeders out there. So we were kind of taught to have a love of birds and to recognize them and notice them and listen for them. And so that's especially important to me. And one of the things that I think that I really wanted to share with you guys is that, there's almost always a way to overcome, to find the gold lining in a situation. By no means the loss of the farm next door is not, that's not super high on the list of losses, right? But I want to just say that we have to look for the gold lining when you're able to, but we're not always able to when you're in the heat of the moment. The fact that I was able to write Cool Flowers, that's, is that not my incredible determination to fulfill an obligation, that's what helped me to write Cool Flowers, you know. But, you know, here we are. We now have houses up against our property, up against our little farm here. You can still see, it's particularly in the winter. So that's one of the things that we're editing these days. So one of the things that become clear during the winter when the deciduous trees drop their leaves, and one of the shrubs that that is kind of strong presence on our farm that we love because our eastern bluebirds love them is southern wax myrtles. And they are evergreen, but they do lose some of their leaves in the winter and don't keep a real thick cover, like the eastern red cedars, which we also have a high population of. So we're now doing a little editing to actually create space to plant American hollies, which are evergreen and which are native. And I want to be sure to say this because I think part of what I was missing as a home gardener, master gardener, turned flower farmer, commercial cut flower grower, the tidbit that I missed about natives is what I used to think was, oh, well, natives, naturally grow in your region, and that must make them easier to grow and they are less needy. That's was the extent of my consideration of them. I just never really knew more, but here it is, friends. Here's the bottom line that changed my life. Doug Tallamy's book, I highly recommend anybody growing anything should read Doug's book, Bringing Nature Home. Changed my farming life, changed my attitude, changed my everything because of this. If you're a bird lover like I was, and for us, when I was growing up, we had a high population of Baltimore Orioles at our place, at my childhood home. I mean, we lived in the middle of a neighborhood. We didn't have a garden or a forest. We had a landscape, but we had a high population of Orioles. I have never seen a Baltimore Oriole in my adult life here on our place. And that's just one example. But for us to continue to have native birds like Baltimore Orioles, eastern bluebirds, all the birds that are native to your area that we love so much, the goldfinches, all these birds that we love to see, plus all those that you may not notice until you really start looking. For them to be present, they need native insects to eat. Native insects only live on native plants. Think about that for a minute. As we have been filling our landscapes with all of these non-native, which Doug Tallamy calls alien plants, I mean Japanese this or Japanese that, what you have to realize is, that's a really pretty plant, but it doesn't support any native insects. And when it doesn't support native insects, that means that native birds don't necessarily benefit from that tree. And I was quite surprised to learn, for instance, here where I am in the mid-Atlantic, crepe myrtles are vastly popular. I mean, they grow really well here in our hot summers and they bloom in the middle of the summer. They're everywhere. Guess what? They're not natives. Other than the blooms, perhaps maybe providing some pollen or nectar, they really do not benefit anything. Versus, I think Doug Tallamy says that the oak tree is the most beneficial tree you can plant. It supports like 500 different native insects or creatures. That means that just by making your selection from a native lineup, that you are enhancing the environment around your home, which is going to bring more native, the things that we want to see, the native butterflies, the native birds, the hummers. Y'all, it is just so deep and so wide that it's really a great rabbit hole that I'm going to be going down. It's so evident to see how the chain of life, literally, from the smallest microscopic microbe down in the soil up to the largest raptor we have, the bald eagle, they all depend. It's just every piece of the chain makes a difference. And when we eliminate one of those chain links, it really makes, it impacts our environment. It's really pretty dadgum amazing that things have survived as long as they have, with the way that we have, built and consumed and changed and planted things that are not native at all. And so, just to even make it even deeper, when we bring these non-native plants in from other places, they bring with them their native insects for that plant. But guess what? Because Japanese beetles, let's just say, Japanese beetles were brought over, then they don't have a native predator. The system was made pretty perfect, y'all. And when we started shuffling stuff around, it really, you can just see how we are where we are, right? And, one of the things that I remembered reading in Doug's book was about one of the studies. It's been like 4 years since I read this. Sorry, y'all, I'm getting stuffy as I'm talking here. Was they did a study where they were trying to see who in the chain, in a specific chain of a cycle of starting at the bottom of the food chain and working straight up, right? Who is the most important? Who is the most significant? What missing character in that line would have the largest impact? And what they in fact found was that pretty much everybody in the chain at some point is a significant player, meaning every piece has to be present for it to really work. And for the, if you think of is it a sprocket that a chain is on a bicycle? That when one tooth on that sprocket breaks off, then the chain is vulnerable to hop off at that spot, right? That's kind of how it works, y'all. But I want to say that I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about this. I'm not saying that I'm glad we lost that farm, because, literally, I bet Steve and I say it to each other weekly that, we just miss it so much. We were so grateful every day for it when we had it. We make reference to when the farm was there. The noise pollution we hear now, and amongst all kinds of other things. We find trash on our farm now. We never had that before, where stuff blows over here, even with that thick border. But, good can come from it. And sometimes it's a really hard thing to swallow. But, on this side of the fence, we are continuing to not keep our eyes just on this side, because we're friends with all of our neighbors and all that kind of stuff over there. So soon after I wrote that blog, the land development happen. And I will say to you that for anyone out there that, because I've heard from so many people, anyone that has gone through it or is going through it, I am just so sorry for what you're going through. And as I have said on more than one occasion, other than losing my parents, watching them wrestle a 200-year-old cedar tree that it took 3 mega excavators to take it down. And I could not watch, y'all. It's almost like I had to honor the tree by somebody witnessing it going down, and the snapping and the cracking. I mean, it was bad. I actually videoed it, and then I deleted it. I thought, why do I ever want to, I never want to watch that again. But it was really tough, but I got through it, and you just have to find, even though the door has been shut, you have to look for the windows that are opening. And that happened for me by discovering natives and the benefits and the rescue of planting native borders on my farm, for me and my farm, but also for the community. And, so I hope that this is helped, And so as I said in the article that, today is the first day of the rest of my farming life, and it really did turn me then. And I hope it can turn you. I highly recommend. Doug has several books, I think 2 more books that he has written since the Bringing Nature Home came out. And I had the honor of eating a meal with him. We both spoke at a conference here locally, and they took us out to dinner. And I was actually introduced to Thai food with Doug. And anyway, I'm thankful for him and the message that he's bringing. And friends, part of his message is that it's not too late. Each and every one of us can make a difference by the choices that we make in our yard. And I'm not saying, and he's not saying, that you need to go out there and cut down everything that's non-native. It's that as you add to your landscape, or you have choices, to consider natives for all these reasons that I've mentioned. And check out his books. If you ever get the opportunity to hear him speak, and I'm pretty sure there's some on YouTube, he's a gift. Really, really great guy. And so friends, on this side of the fence, things are going really well, and it just brings another whole dynamic to your farm. And many of these natives you can plant also are cuttable. So, all right, folks, that's what I wanted to share with you today. And over on thegardenersworkshop.com, if you go to the Learning Center, we just have a whole lot of resources. We do have a live farm camera. There's not a lot of action happening usually. It is on my garden, but you can actually check in and kind of see what's going on. My Field and Garden podcast is over there, as well as my blog. There's a video guide, all things soil blocking. And then we also have a page so you want to be a flower farmer, that just lists some of our references and who some of our partners are. And so friends, I just appreciate you being here. And until we meet again, ciao.